Hey everyone, welcome to Startup Talks. Today's case is Theranos, the company that promised hundreds of blood tests from a single drop and built a $9 billion story on it. Let's get into it. So today's case is Theranos, and the pitch is genuinely incredible. Hundreds of blood tests from a single drop of blood taken from a finger prick. No needles, no vials, results in minutes at a fraction of the cost of a normal lab.
And the part people forget that you wouldn't even have to go to a lab. The whole point was you get it done right where you are.
Exactly. At its peak, the company was valued at around $9 billion, and it raised more than $700 million from investors.
If that machine had actually worked, this is a real revolution in diagnostics. That's the thing. The dream wasn't stupid, the dream was beautiful.
So let's talk about the person at the center of all this. The founder is a young woman, Elizabeth Holmes, and Forbes named her the youngest self-made woman billionaire in America.
How young are we talking?
She was born in 1984 into a very well-connected family. An ancestor founded a large American company back in the early 20th century, and her father worked at Enron and then in government.
Enron, that's the company that became the biggest corporate fraud scandal of its era. Quite a family backdrop for this particular story.
From childhood, she said she wanted to be a billionaire. She learned Mandarin Chinese early, did programming as a teenager, the classic showed promise from the start profile.
So this wasn't someone who stumbled into ambition. It was the whole identity from day one.
She entered Stanford in 2002 to study chemical engineering, became a President's Scholar with a research stipend, and worked in Professor Channing Robertson's lab, the only undergraduate among the graduate students.
That's genuinely impressive, to be fair. Normally, you finish a master's before you're anywhere near that kind of research.
Then, after her first year, she interned at the Genome Institute of Singapore, working on virus detection, and that's where the idea hit her. What if you could run dozens of blood tests from one tiny sample?
One little drop of blood, that's the seed of the whole thing.
In 2004, at around 19, she drops out of Stanford and puts her tuition money into a company. First called Real-Time Cures, later renamed Theranos.
Theranos, where does that name come from?
It's a portmanteau. Therapy plus diagnosis, smashed together into Theranos.
Sounds like some ancient Greek or Roman deity, which honestly fits the mythology they were building.
And she deliberately built a Steve Jobs persona, the black turtlenecks, an unusually low voice, hired designers to give everything that Apple-like aesthetic.
Manufacturing the genius image before there was a product to back it up.
Now we bring in the second character, Ramesh Balwani, who went by Sunny. They'd met back in 2002 in Beijing on a Mandarin program.
How does he fit into the company?
He was about 19 years older than her, and he'd had a successful software career, built an e-commerce startup, and sold it. He put around $10 million into Theranos through a personal loan, and became president and chief operating officer.
COO? So the person who actually runs day-to-day operations.
Right, and here's the twist. He was also secretly her boyfriend. Nobody knew, not the employees, not the board.
So it was an office romance running the entire company, completely hidden. That's going to matter later.
Let's pin down the central promise. The device, codenamed Edison, about the size of a desktop printer, was supposed to run over 200 blood tests from a few drops off your finger. No needles, no test tubes, results in a minute, and far cheaper than a normal lab.
And the board of directors, you'd assume it's stacked with medical experts.
That's the problem. The board was packed with enormous names, but essentially no diagnostic testing expertise. The first big backer was Tim Draper, a venture capitalist and family friend, and in late 2004, they raised around $6.9 million.
So who ends up on this board?
In 2011, Holmes meets former Secretary of State George Shultz, who joins and brings in an extraordinary roster: Henry Kissinger, former Defense Secretary William Perry, General James Mattis, Senator Sam Nunn, and Admiral, the former CEO of Wells Fargo, the head of Bechtel.
The names speak for themselves. That's a wall of credibility.
And almost all of it diplomatic or military. The one person with any medical background was former Senator Bill Frist, a transplant surgeon who'd gone into politics.
So, a board built to impress, not to catch problems. Nobody in the room who could actually look at the science and say, wait, this doesn't work. Let's see.
So in 2013, Theranos comes out of stealth and lands a huge deal, a partnership with Walgreens, the biggest pharmacy chain in the US. They open Theranos wellness centers in more than 40 Walgreens stores.
And there was a second one, right?
Yes, a deal with Safeway, the supermarket chain. Safeway spent around $350 million retrofitting 800 stores for Theranos clinics.
350 million. That's not a pilot, that's betting the company on it.
And here's the kicker. Walgreens reportedly paid before the technology was ever proven. Roughly $100 million as an innovation fee, plus a $40 million convertible loan. Holmes promised them around $2 billion a year in revenue, and the deals got signed without real due diligence.
No due diligence on a deal that size? Due diligence is the basic homework. You check that the thing actually works before you sign. You do that buying a used car.
Then in 2014, Forbes puts Holmes on the cover. The company's valued at $9 billion. She's the youngest self-made woman billionaire, net worth estimated at $4.5 billion.
And it just snowballs from there, I assume.
Completely. She's on Time's 100 Most Influential People. Vice President Joe Biden visits the lab and praises it.
So the lesson here is almost uncomfortable. A well-packaged story, dressed up as a national myth, worked so well that people stopped checking. And once everyone believes it, checking starts to feel rude.
So what actually went wrong? Problem one, and honestly you could end the story here. The technology never worked.
At all?
The Edison device couldn't do what Holmes claimed. The results were inaccurate, sometimes outright dangerous. A false negative could hide a real diagnosis and tell a sick patient everything's fine.
So how were they producing results at all?
They secretly ran the vast majority of tests on conventional, third-party machines, Siemens analyzers, not on their own device.
You know, that's actually a familiar move. It's like those AI startups that quietly hire a room full of people to do by hand what the algorithm supposedly does.
Right. And as a bootstrapping trick that's almost defensible, it's the concierge approach. Fake the engine with humans until you can build the real one. The problem is what happens when it gets exposed.
The hype collapses like a house of cards. The approach is fine, but the moment the curtain comes down, the company can't operate. The bubble was the asset.
And there's a self-protecting loop in there. In 2006, during a demonstration for Novartis where the Edison failed, the chief financial officer raised concerns and was immediately fired.
So the message to everyone watching is clear. The hype is sacred. Don't touch it.
Problem 2. A culture of fear and total secrecy. Holmes and Balwani built an environment where different teams had no idea what other teams were doing.
So nobody could see the whole picture. Everyone's working on a piece of a dream they can't actually see.
Exactly. And if an employee started asking questions, they were fired. When the Walgreens people came to the office, they weren't even allowed to see the lab.
That alone should have been the red flag. You're betting hundreds of millions and they won't show you the room?
It gets worse. To convince Walgreens, they faked validation reports with Pfizer and Schering-Plough logos on them, reports those companies never actually wrote.
So now we're past optimism and into straight forgery.
And the complaints kept building. By late 2014, doctors were reporting that the results were nowhere near accurate. The lab director, Adam Rosendorf, described it as a crescendo. It just kept getting louder.
A crescendo in music is the sound rising and rising and rising, fitting.
And rather than defend technology he knew was broken, Rosendorf resigned. That's the lab director, not a junior person.
When the person running the actual lab walks out instead of signing off, that tells you everything.
Problem 3. Whistleblowers and the press. In 2015, two former employees, Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz, go to a Wall Street Journal reporter named John Carreyrou.
Tyler Schultz. Any relation to the board member?
His grandson. George Schultz's own grandson is one of the people blowing the whistle.
That's extraordinary. So what were they risking?
A lot. Theranos had its own private detective force watching employees to stop anyone talking. Tyler Schultz used a burner phone to avoid them.
A $9 billion company with its own surveillance operation pointed at its own staff. That's a real threat to go up against.
And this is where the press earns its keep. They'll take on a risky story that official institutions won't touch.
There's a structural reason for that. In the US, there are real protections for journalists, so a reporter can chase something dangerous without being thrown in jail for it. That kind of latitude doesn't exist everywhere.
And on the 16th of October 2015, Carreyrou publishes a front-page investigation in the Journal. The Edison is used for only a tiny fraction of tests, and the results are unreliable.
And that's the detonation. From there, it's a chain reaction.
So, the chain reaction. October 2015. The FDA flags Theranos' blood collection tube as an unapproved medical device.
That's the federal regulator stepping in.
Then in early 2016, the lab regulators warn that Theranos' lab poses an immediate danger to patients and give them about 10 days to fix it.
10 days for something they'd failed to build for years. You can fix a label in 10 days. You can't fix that.
Right. So in 2016, they void 2 years of Edison test results. Then in June, Forbes revises Holmes' net worth from $4.5 billion to effectively zero, and the company's valuation gets cut from $9 billion to around $800 million.
And the partners?
Walgreens ends the partnership. They don't deal with fraud. In July, Theranos gets a 2-year ban from operating a lab. Balwani had already left in May.
So how does it actually end?
October 2016. They close all the labs and lay off around 340 employees. In 2018, the SEC charges Holmes and Balwani with fraud over the $700 million they raised. Holmes steps down as CEO. Federal charges of wire fraud and conspiracy follow, and the company is formally dissolved that September.
And the criminal case itself?
January 2022. Holmes is found guilty on 4 of 11 counts, including defrauding investors. November 2022, she's sentenced to 11 years and 3 months, and later she and Balwani are ordered to pay around $452 million in restitution.
And she's actually serving it?
She reported to a minimum security federal women's prison in Bryan, Texas in May 2023. Balwani was convicted on 12 counts and sentenced to around 13 years. And in 2025, the appeals court upheld both convictions and sentences.
So, after all of it, the verdicts stand. That's the end of the road.
Now let's actually look at this as a case. Here's the uncomfortable part. From a pure startup playbook view, they did a lot of it right.
Go on.
Build the hype, raise on a story, secure powerful backers, push hard through the wall. Even with a device that didn't work, the first couple of years are textbook execution.
So, why did it work at all? Because most people don't do that. Most people are too afraid to start, too afraid to make the bold claim.
And in American business culture, those connections matter enormously. Who's backing you? Whose names are on your board? She managed to make a house of cards look like a castle on a hill.
So if the playbook was right, what's the actual mistake?
They didn't see the limits. They confused going public with the long mandatory testing cycle that medicine actually requires.
That's the key distinction. In pharma, that 20-year process exists for a reason. The double-blind trials, the testing across living organisms, then patients. You do not put an unproven product into the public and tell people it works.
The slow cycle isn't bureaucracy for its own sake. It's the thing that stops exactly this. Second lesson, recognizing when to stop and take the loss. Even a public failure can be stabilized if you admit the mistake.
That's the part founders find impossible. Fixing the loss early feels like losing everything.
But it's often the opposite. Take the hit, stabilize, and you can come back stronger. Sometimes people trust you more for it, and you grow higher than before.
It's like a comeback story. Plenty of companies book the loss and then reach bigger results, just because people start believing in them again.
There was a moment to step back, freeze the deals, admit the results were wrong, the way big corporations do when something fails. They blew straight past it.
When you're ramming your head through the wall in public, there's still a point where you can stop, regroup, and come back for another round. It costs you, but it's survivable.
Third, board composition. There wasn't a single scientist or doctor who could have caught this. People with the right background might genuinely have prevented the catastrophe.
And the irony is that those big political and military names had every reason not to. Once it collapsed, they were sitting in the middle of the scandal. So admitting the device didn't work was a hit to their own reputations too.
Which connects to the next lesson. Do real due diligence. Not just the legal paperwork check, but a technical one.
Think of it like buying a car. You take it to a mechanic, pay them a little, have them open the hood and actually look. You do that whether you trust the seller or not.
And here, there was no technical due diligence. Nobody who could open the hood and say, this technology is fake. The issues you ignore at the start come back against you later in the disputes and the lawsuits.
And there's the famous Silicon Valley mantra hovering over all of it. Fake it till you make it.
Holmes basically rode that mantra as a thing that carries you through early gaps. Fine, but she rode it far, far too long.
At some point, fake it till you make it needs the make it part. She just kept faking.
I'll give her one genuine compliment, though. I watched an interview, the black turtleneck, that deliberate low voice, the unblinking stare, and the charisma is real. It works on people.
And you do need that. If you want to ride a story this far, you have to be magnetic. The charm was a real part of how this happened.
So the big question the whole thing leaves you with, how did this hold together for 15 years?
The first 10 are almost explainable. They were in stealth mode, out of sight, and they had money.
15 years, over 700 million raised, a $9 billion valuation at the peak. So what's the closing line on this one?
They did everything right except one thing. They never saw the limits.
That's it exactly. Build big, push hard, all of it. But remember, you're in the real world, not an invented one. And don't assume everything is lost the moment you book a loss.
2 more while we're at it. Bring people onto the team who actually understand the subject. Real expertise, not just famous names.
And the old one, trust, but verify. Your vision should always be balanced by someone genuinely skeptical.
And ideally, that skepticism is grounded in real-world practice, not just instinct. A vision with no one checking it is exactly how you get a $9 billion machine that can't read a drop of blood.
That's all for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of Startup Talks.